Hello everyone, I'm Jacob, Community Manager with Paradox Studio Black. Today we're reading the words of Mikhail Anderson for another By God Alone developer diary. Last time we walked through ecclesiastical titles and rites, and while we shone a light on clerical gameplay and faith mechanics, we did not really touch on how a secular character, who you as the player most often control, can harness said clerical mechanics. So, let's go there. The year is 1075 AD. You are the king of West Francia, and one of your grouchiest dukes, the one you've stubbornly refused a council seat for decades, has become too big for his britches. He has virtually stopped pretending he isn't preparing a revolt, and you would like him stripped of his vassal oaths before it gets to that point. The papacy, however, has made it clear that complaints from secular kings about which of their unruly dukes is or isn't in good standing with God are not presently one of Rome's priorities. Mercifully, you do have a court chaplain who also happens to be an archbishop, who, with a hook fabricated by your spy master, owes you a favor large enough to impose an excommunication order all on his own, which would in turn permit you to revoke his title without causing an upset from your other vassals. The Duke, after all, falls under the Archbishop's spiritual jurisdiction as well. A brief letter to Rome on your behalf, and your uppity Duke has learned what can happen if he goes against his king's will. This week is about puppets, the system by which you, the secular ruler, get clerical levers to move on your behalf, and Playable Theocracies, the answer to the question, what if I just played the clergyman myself? Standard caveat applies. Everything we're talking about today is a work in progress. Nothing you see here is final, and we'd love your feedback on the systems shown. A puppet is a real character who behaves in accordance with how NPCs typically act in Crusader Kings 3. However, by virtue of your hold over them, you can also make them act according to your ideas of what they should do. In By God Alone, we are introducing two puppet types which relate specifically to organized religions. The system itself is open both to future expansion and to modders, and is not fundamentally tied to religious matters as such. When puppets take action at their master's command, the game reads this action as originating from the puppet. Costs and consequences are levied on them, not on you. For the modders out there, this does involve some minimal setup per action to ensure the initiator is distinguished from the one actually executing it, but the system is designed to be as designer and modder friendly as possible. In By God Alone, your court chaplain is your persistent puppet candidate. To make them compliant requires meeting some condition, the most obvious one being having a hook on them, but a variety of other conditions can also be leveraged to ensure compliance. Having a very high level of devotion yourself, having them as a friend or lover, if they sufficiently fear you, or if you are family. Having your dynasty deeply embroiled within the church machinery can be a powerful move. Currently, you can work through your puppeted court chaplain to take the following actions. Founding a rite, the secular ruler's only legal route into the rite system we showed off in the last By God Alone developer diary. Now you know who's holding the pen. Planning and constructing a grand cathedral as a great project, funded out of the church treasury rather than your purse. Mass converting neighboring pagans through a great project. Excommunicating a character in the same archdiocese, with the request lodged under their name rather than yours. Requesting a new ecclesiastical title, splitting the current region in two. Requesting an elevation to the see for your puppet, making them an archbishop or patriarch. Or turning them into the head of a faith that currently doesn't have one, such as Chalcedonian Christianity in 867. Virtually every new action we're making available to Theocratic characters, we're also making available through the puppet system. We're not looking to duplicate actions you can normally do yourself, however. The actions you can take through your puppet is typically limited to those which you do not have direct control over already. The other puppet type we're adding is the Pope. If you somehow manage to elevate your puppet to this position, or declare your puppet the true Pope and depose the pretender in Rome, you will have the Pope himself under your thumb via the same system. More on this, and anti-popes in general, in a future developer diary. There is, of course, a more elegant solution to the problem of an uncooperative court chaplain, which is, be your own clergyman. Theocratic characters, prince bishops, landed archbishops, patriarchs, and cardinals, even the Pope himself, are now playable in By God Alone. Theocratic government has been in the codebase since the launch of Crusader Kings 3, but the title holders have always been NPCs whose succession went into a black box. With By God Alone, you can play them, inherit through them in the limited sense theocrats inherit, or continue your dynasty story through them rather than around them. There's been a lot of speculation over the years around how theocracies could be made playable, and even if they should be made playable, given they don't follow dynastic inheritance. Well, Crusader Kings 3 has evolved a lot over the years, with landless play, administrative realms, and choose-your-own-destiny type features already transforming what the core play experience looks like. So it's time to rip off the band-aid and give you a new type of player succession, along organizational lines rather than strictly dynastic ones. Put simply, when playing as a theocracy, if you die without a member of your dynasty set to inherit your title, you will instead resume playing the next clergyman in line for your title. However, while clerical dynasty building was certainly something both the Christian church and secular rulers tried to crack down on throughout history, it was not unheard of. With the faith's evolution over centuries of tumult modeled in By God Alone, particularly in the early start date, both getting your cake and eating it too is far from impossible, as we'll outline in a moment. Before we go too far, however, let's talk about what you can actually do as a theocratic ruler. Within Christianity, this is done with the confines of the new government type, ecclesiastical government. Similar but not identical to the theocratic government. Succession is appointment-based. When a theocrat dies, the next holder is selected from local clergy, with weights based on how good of a Christian they are, or appear to be, and how well they have served the faith. A theocratic ruler has a treasury, which belongs to the church, and works similarly to treasury and administrative realms, as distinct from their personal gold reserves. They have a personal clerical domicile that they can build up to better see to the needs of their flock. They can appoint subordinates within their own ecclesiastical hierarchy. They often serve as the court chaplain of local secular rulers. They cannot start wars against Christian rulers, but can gain land from Christian rulers by exploiting inheritance laws. They also maintain their own church authority law group, the theocratic parallel to a feudal lord's crown authority. Raising it costs piety but unlocks abilities, most notably the legal precondition for establishing a theocratic dynasty. Letting it slip exposes you to a new humiliation casus belli that Christian neighbors with higher authority or piety can declare. Ultimately, they remain a political actor. They can still rise, fall, and be schemed against. What they don't get is automatic direct dynastic continuity through children, the way a feudal duke does. Most theocrats are ostensibly sworn to celibacy, and the canonical succession model is appointment to a related or promising clergy character, rather than to your bloodline. We've leaned into this rather than around it. The dynasty building loop for a theocrat is about ensuring the next holder of your see is also of your house, by mentoring and elevating eligible nephews and protégés in time for them to be on the appointment shortlist when you die. The extreme case is the Holy Father himself. As Pope, you sit on top of the central church treasury, funded by tithes from every Catholic church in Christendom, and quite possibly the single largest pot of gold in the game, at least when the church is healthy. You hold the levers a secular player can only influence through their puppets. You appoint and pay cardinals and give them orders. You call ecumenical councils and decide what they are about. You excommunicate rulers who displease you, with all the secondary consequences that cascade through the political map. You approve holy sites for Catholicism, and you issue papal bulls, powerful edicts underwritten by Rome. These include the ability to launch a targeted crusade, declaring a rite heretical, or declaring a certain tenet permitted or forbidden. Of course, every secular Christian ruler is, at some level, trying to influence you. Christian kings and emperors will line up at the Apostolic Palace to request some favor or another. It's up to you to decide who to hear and whose wishes align with the will of God. Note that we will no longer direct every request for divine grace through the Pope. Many concerns can be handled by the Church's local representatives, archbishops, to avoid spamming a player whenever some local count thinks that their half-brother is an affront to God. Speaking of the Apostolic Palace, this will be a new throne room which you will see and have to maintain, both when playing as the Pope and when visiting Rome to ask the papacy to grace you in various ways. Visuals will be coming later. With the ability to play as the Pope, it also makes the question of who becomes the next Pope that much more relevant. While there were certainly times in the history of Catholicism when it took quite a long time for a Pope to get elected, the record is currently held by the election of Pope Gregory X in 1271, after over 1,000 days of divisive debates resulting in the locals locking the cardinals up and restricting their access to food and shelter until they came to an agreement, thus establishing the conclave tradition we know today. Crusader Kings 3 isn't really paced for tactical plotting over a short period of days or weeks, however. As such, the college is always considered to be deliberating over who will take the seat next, and cardinals can be influenced at any time. There are always 3 candidates for the seat, selected on the following criteria. The obvious choice, the cardinal most entrenched in the church power structure. The pious choice, the cardinal with the highest level of devotion. And the powerful choice, the right head with the largest flock. Of these selected candidates, cardinals will select their preferred option based on typical parameters like opinion, but also how their teachings align with the cardinal's traits. Every papal candidate has the opportunity to switch one core tenet as they rise to the seat, and if this change sits well with a particular cardinal, they're more likely to align with that candidate. Spiritual fulfillment thereby becomes the driving force of the evolution of the Christian faith. Oh, and should you manage to get elected, you may, of course, select what Christendom will henceforth know you as. The puppet system is faith agnostic at the framework level. The same compliance check would carry over to any organized religion with a realm priest. However, a lot of the new actions we're making for By God Alone are specifically geared towards Christianity. Manipulating the archdiocese titles, asking for a cardinalate, building cathedrals. As such, the applicability of non-Christian realm priest puppets will be a bit lower. Playable Theocracies are the more broadly applicable half. The pre-existing theocracy government type covers Cleria's ruler arrangements outside Christianity. What does not generalize is the centralized Christian institutional spine. The Curia, the College of Cardinals, the Papal Bull, the ecclesiastical title hierarchy. Those remain Christian only because that's primarily what this expansion is modeling. And with that, this week's Developer Diary comes to a close. As always, thank you for watching, and if you want to stay up to date with everything Crusader Kings 3, then please like the video and subscribe to the channel. You know, in last week's Developer Diary, I complained about having a short work week. Well, this week is where the consequences are rearing their head. I'm currently scrambling to get this dev diary done as quickly as possible so it can go out at the usual time. Normally I would record these a few days in advance, but currently we're about 24 hours away from publication time. As before, thank you to the video production team. I apologize for getting this to you as late as I am. Please do not kill me.